I was raised by Latino parents in an immigrant home. And I became a translator like at 9 years old. My parents telling me, hijo, ven acá, léeme aquí por favor. So now I'm reading documents, translating words I don't know, stuttering, reading extra slow. I was raised with them calling cards my folks used to use to call back home to Guatemala and El Salvador. I was raised talking to a bunch of relatives I had never met over the phone. I was raised being told que no ser mal educado and introduce myself when I walk through the door. And that's the reason that I always say, hello, my name's Jose Cordon. I was raised con pan dulce y cafecito, pupusas, arroz con frijolitos, ay, qué rico. In my home, when you fell as a niño, they say, ay, mijo, pobrecito, ven pa' acá. Sana, sana, colita de rana, and boom, bingo. The wound was all healed. Sounds kind of silly now, but back then it seemed so real. I was raised with stories of La Llorona, El Cucuy, and La Migra. The first two scared children. The last scares the entire familia. So I mean no apologies. ICE is acting like it's ISIS, terrorizing families. So when we see them rolling through communities, we see them as a threat. That's why we yell, fuck ICE every chance we get. You see, I was raised with a double identity. And I developed a bittersweet love for this nation simultaneously. Its well-advertised legacy as the home of the free allows for people to dream. It gives people the bravery to leave their families to go seek better tomorrows in the land of opportunities of which America always speaks. But when the objective is reached, after long nights in the cold and scorching days in the heat, with the desire to support family down south even with no money to eat, with the will to work for the bare minimum 7 days of the week, it isn't the Statue of Liberty who they have the pleasure to meet. It's either the hungry, huddled masses segregated into the kids, the he's, the she's, surrounded by chain link fences on top of floors of concrete, reminiscent of Dao Chow in 1933, the Nazis' first concentration camp if you want a fan of history. Or they're met with an unsure, unwelcome existence in American society, with the realization that the American dream is sold separately with high interest and an expensive fee, and that America isn't as accepting as some people make it seem. You see, I was raised aware of race relations, but never understood where I fit into the situation. And since I was raised to be humble, I never questioned my place in the conversation. Or perhaps I just didn't know how. You see, I was raised with English as my second language. And that's because I was raised by Latino parents in an immigrant home, con fruta cortada con tajín y limón. I was raised drinking chocolate de abuelita hecho con mucho amor. I was raised by parents willing to sacrifice, willing to risk it all for a chance at a better life, even life itself. I was raised to go get it, con ganas, and never lose hope. That's why I'm proud to say I was raised by Latino parents in an immigrant home.
My name's Jose Cordon. I am the proud son of immigrants from Guatemala and El Salvador, right? Proud son of immigrants, and I'm also a poet. I've been writing, sharing poetry for over 15 years or so, and really for the past 7 or so years, been doing it professionally, meaning me getting paid to go out and share poetry, write
Mm-hmm.
poetry, and within the past this is my second year now. And hopefully there's more blessings in store. But this will be the second year now that I kind of do it full time, and
That's amazing.
I also thank you, bro. I also do other things related to the art. So outside of writing poetry, and I'll help put together other programs for folks and do
Mm-hmm.
poetry workshops. So it's not always just sharing poetry in and of itself. There's a lot of things that entail being a full-time poet creative. And so that's what I do now, right? But in addition to that, I'm a community organizer. I've been doing community organizing for quite a while. I'm a founder of an organization called Grassroots Poetry.
Yep.
Also have had a couple of different businesses. Um, yeah, man. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah,
And
of
that's a
course.
little bit about myself as we get into it.
Yeah, and did you grow up in the West Coast or did you grow up here?
Yeah, man, I grew up in California for the most part. Now, I did
Okay.
spend 1 year over in Georgia when I was about
Okay.
12, 13 or so. But most of my life, man, has been here in the area within these kind of the Bay Area boundaries. Right now, we'd be kind of like on the limits of that.
Yeah.
in Antioch. But yeah, how about yourself?
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I've been I moved around a lot. I grew up in well, I was born in Guatemala and then immigrated here when I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
So lived in California for 2 years. I have family in Inglewood, so I go back every now and then to visit them. But and then lived in Colorado for a year, and then in Jersey I've been the rest of my life. So it's just kind of like jumped around.
Oh, nice. I don't know if
Yeah.
you saw, man, but I was in Jersey last year. I
Oh,
forget.
what?
I forget. I was in Teaneck. Um,
Okay.
I was there. There's a young man. Well, there's a gentleman who put together a film, right? My
Okay.
guy's name slipping my mind real quick. Junior.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, he put together a film, a full-length film, kind of telling a story through a lens of a young Salvadoreño, right,
Mm.
and his mother, and it was really cool. So he took it to a few different places. He had like a tour that he did with it. I
Yeah.
connected him out here in San Francisco, and then I met him up again over there in New Jersey.
Wow.
Pretty much what would happen is I'll do a little bit of poetry, and then we would introduce the film. Right.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And that was here in
Yeah, man, I was
Jersey?
there.
That's awesome. Do you come here often or no? Just like
Nah,
every once
it
in a
was
blue
just that
moon.
one, man.
Okay. Okay.
Hopefully though I'll be back. You know, that if again
Hey,
I just go where the wind takes me, man.
I love that. And look, if you're around this area, man, hit me up. We'll link up and then just have a good chat and everything. I'd love to see you. But if I'm over there too, like I said, I visit family sometimes. I'll definitely hit you up and see if you got maybe come out to one of your shows or something.
Yeah, for sure,
That'd be
man.
cool. But speaking of where you grow up, you know, I see a lot of the elements of like where you grew up in your poetry.
Mm.
Um, how has that like shaped, the work that you do um and just growing up in general?
Yeah, man, for so because one of the core principles, in my opinion, of poetry is to be honest. A lot of the work, or a lot of the words and the work, I guess you could say, derives from a place of, I wouldn't say expertise, but comes from a place of, most of it, not all of it, comes from a place of understanding,
Mm,
right? And a lot of understanding has come through my upbringing, right?
yeah,
In the different hats and lenses um, that I've seen life through, that I've experienced life as, whether it's as a community organizer, whether it's as a poet, as a son of immigrant, right?
right,
All of these different identities and all of these different lenses have taken, and the reason why some of these things, one of the reasons that I am a community organizer,
yeah,
stems from, seeing my mother back in the day, really taking care of folks, my
mm,
father, always wanted to help out people. So it all kind of merges and meshes to create the poetry. So a lot of the poetry comes from that lived experience, right? Because there's a lot of personal stuff in there. Um,
yeah,
However, now there's some other poems that are more informed through more research and study-based methods, right? Where it's not necessarily lived experience. I'm not talking about a personal issue, or I'm not talking about a personal aspiration, or I'm not talking about a personal experience. I'm trying to understand the topic, right? I'm trying
right.
to understand an issue, and so I'll go in and I'll dive into the topic and do research. But most of it, yeah, it's heavily informed by that upbringing.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's what I've noticed in a lot of the work, and I think that's why a lot of people also just resonate with it. It's a lot of the things that you talk about is a lot of things that we grew up with. Whether you're an immigrant or just like a first gen, second gen, it's still part of that like family culture, right? And then so I love seeing that in your work. But before we dive, deep into your poetry and like your activism, I wanted to ask you like what's something that people might be surprised to like learn about you?
To learn about me,
Yeah.
maybe that I really enjoy video games, man.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
I think they're super fun.
Yeah.
I like the creation aspect in terms
Okay.
of knowing that it came from somebody's mind and the process, the work ethic that it takes to make a game, especially a good game. But then also the creation process when it comes to like creating like a character or like
Yeah.
like a creating whatever, mostly characters,
Yeah.
the customized
Well,
stuff.
you're a very like creative person, so like I could see you
Yeah,
having
so
fun with the
yeah,
customization
man.
of it all.
So I like video games. I don't. That's not something that I necessarily blast out there. So that might
Yeah.
be that might be something folks are surprised to hear.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. What you been playing lately?
Oh man, there's I have a kind of core group of games that I wrote to. I just finished Red Dead Redemption
Mm,
for the most
it's a
part.
good one.
Actually, I didn't really finish it because I got to have you played Red Dead Redemption?
Yeah, yeah. I
The
played the
second
first
one?
one because don't they have the second one now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't
Have you
played the
played the
second
second
one.
one?
No, no, I haven't played it, but I hear it's
So
good.
so the in the first one, I think you're Jason or something. Who are you in the first one?
I forget the names, I'll be honest with you,
The
but
main
it's been a minute.
character.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
anyways,
yeah, yeah.
um. In the second one, you play as a dude named Arthur Morgan. For
John
the
Marston. That's
John,
the
yeah,
yeah. I
there
just
you
looked it
go.
up.
So you play as
Yeah.
Arthur for a large portion, but then at a certain point in time, you switch to John, right?
Oh.
So I got to the part where I switched to John, and then I was like, you know what? I don't even want to know what happens right now. So I restarted it, but I haven't started playing it again. The
Yeah.
one that I've been on right now, has been a game called State of Decay,
Okay.
2. It's a zombie game, you feel me? And then
Yeah. Yeah, love that.
you gotta have like different you recruit different characters. Everyone has like a little different trade, and it's fun, man.
Yeah.
But I rotate between that, um, Payday 2
Oh,
actually,
Payday, yep. I know Payday.
Payday, Borderlands,
Yep.
and a game
Good one.
called It Takes Two. I don't
Yep.
know. It's a co-op game.
Yep, yep. I think it's is it I don't think it's exclusive. Is it on the PlayStation or I think you play
No,
on
it's that.
Steam.
Well, at least I got it on Xbox.
Oh,
I
okay, yeah,
got
yeah.
an Xbox 360 actually. Xbox One. I got Xbox on
Oh, you're
Xbox
an
One.
Xbox guy, huh?
Yeah,
We won't
yeah,
start
man.
that. We won't start that debate.
Now when we were young, man. I don't know what it was. Um, I really don't know what it was, bro. But I got an Xbox, even though I think the first console that we had, I think, was like the PlayStation, the Nintendo or the PlayStation. And then my brother just kind of kept going with the PlayStation, and I just somehow got the Xbox, and he's never
Yeah,
bought
yeah.
an Xbox after that. I've never bought a PlayStation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's how it is. I think it's tough to just go from one to the other, man.
man. Yeah, so those games right now.
Yeah. All right. I love that, man. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Like I said, I love learning something about people that just they don't usually just put out there because really it really like humanizes them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But bringing you back to why you're here. What the people want to hear about is definitely your poetry, your activism, all the work that you do. Um, your poetry and activism, they're like deeply personal. Then with themes that usually involve immigration, identity that we covered, and social justice. Um, I want to know if you remember the moment that you realized the power of storytelling and like what drew you to those topics. Like if you just had, I don't know, if growing up when you were just like, damn, like this is what I want to do.
Of course. Now, not necessarily the moment. I guess that's a two-part question.
Yeah, yeah.
The first part is like when did I realize kind of the power of storytelling, and then I forget
Yep.
what was that second part?
The second part was just if you have ever had like that moment where you were like, this is what I wanted to do for like the rest of
Yeah,
my
yeah,
life.
okay.
Yeah.
So the first part, it wasn't necessarily when I realized the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
but more so the power of words.
Mm.
I think the power of storytelling is something newer that I've begun to
Okay.
understand, right? And really try to hone in on, but at least consciously.
Yeah.
But the power of words, I remember not necessarily the day or precise moment, but I guess in a way I do. It was because of a song, and I believe
Oh.
the song was Harlem Streets
Okay.
by Immortal Technique. Matter of
Yep.
fact, let me
Yeah.
look it up. So let me see. I think is Harlem Street lyrics. Boom, boom, boom. So he was a very big inspiration for me early on. Um, yeah. So it was that song. Now it wasn't the first song that I've heard of Immortal Technique, but
Okay.
after being introduced to Immortal Technique, I gravitated to his music. It was very, very political, very aggressive. It was quite lyrical, in certain points. Um, and some many metaphors, and I just really liked it, especially me being somebody who was already trying to write a bit.
Mm.
I caught on to that. That's what I liked. So I remember being inspired and kind of moved by his music because of how politically charged it was, but also because of
Okay.
how unapologetically just kind of uh I don't give a fuck type of attitude like
Mm-hmm.
portrayed through the music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was things that I didn't understand. There was quite a lot. I just liked how it sounded, and I would discover little things here and there. Oh wow, that shit was dope. But
Do
then
you
I
remember
came
how old you were before when that
when
happened?
when that happened, I was
Yeah.
probably like 13, maybe
Oh wow. Okay.
13,
Yeah.
12, between 12 and 14, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I came across that song, Harlem Streets, and there's a part that says, "But fuck flossing, mothers are trying to feed children, but gentrification is kicking them out of the
Mm.
buildings." I think that's the line.
Mm.
But I wasn't sure what gentrification meant, and so I don't know if it was this word that got me into this habit or if I already had it prior. But I developed a habit of looking up the words, and I still, I hope everybody does that when words is hard
Yeah.
to understand. But I would look up the words, especially because I was really big into reading at the time, or at least I was reading a lot more because I'm still into it. And I would write down the words in a notebook. I would write down the word, and then I would write down the definition, and then I would write uh, a couple of sentences with the word,
Oh,
right?
okay.
To
Mm-hmm.
really try to understand it, right? Especially if I was going to be working, if I was going to be using words as my artistic kind of medium, I need to understand these words.
Yeah.
So I looked it up what that word meant, and I was really taken back by the power within that word, by what gentrification kind of meant in this kind of idea of neighborhoods becoming overrun by I guess new money or by new
Mm-hmm.
development, where sometimes the people and oftentimes the people within those communities have worked very hard for a long time to improve conditions, and then change happens. Somebody comes in with a big development, and little by little that
Yeah.
progress that was they were asking for, a big wave of change comes in instead and displaces them. you know
Mm-hmm.
um I think I got that right. I'm not sure who speaks there for that definition, in my version, my own words.
No, yeah,
But
that's how I understand it too.
once I realized that, I was like, wow, this is a trip, and it made me understand how
Mm-hmm.
technical words can be with how you place them in the meaning that a single word can carry, and how a word stacked upon each other with these different varying meanings could really create a powerful statement. right? In terms of storytelling in and of itself, that was a more recent kind of
Oh, okay.
realization when started to understand the power of narrative and the power of movies
Mm,
in the kind of social conscious of our people, right? And then when I could go more into that if you wanted to, but then when I discovered that this is what I wanted to do, there was two moments of that.
okay.
There was a moment of I wanna speak as what I do. I want to be a speaker. And
Right.
then there was another moment of I am a poet. Right. I
Mm,
was already doing poetry, but there was
mm.
a moment, there was two different moments where I want to be a speaker, and then there's a different moment where I am a poet. Those were different times, and the latter came latter. And
Mm-hmm.
basically the very first time that I realized like this is what I want to do, I was already into kind of speaking and doing things like that. I've always kind of been on more of the self-educated type, meaning I was never a great student. I never had good grades, but I did enjoy learning
Mm.
and being exposed to some of the different people I was exposed to. I developed a love for learning, right? I developed a love for it. So eventually I started to learn a little bit about business and entrepreneurship
Yeah.
and that is very linked to self-development, right? When you start to get into entrepreneurship,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of also get into self-development in a way. So as I was doing that, I was listening to different motivational speakers, to different people online that were breaking down different business models and things of the sort. And one day I did a poem. I started sharing poetry, like I said, when I was like 14, 15. Um, but on this particular occasion, I was 20 something. And it was at a gala and I had did a performance. I
Okay.
did a poem. And then I don't know what necessarily what it was about that particular day, but there was a couple of guys that I knew that were there who I had participated in a program with years prior when I was in high school. And at the
Okay.
time, they had gotten together to create like this consultant agency of sorts.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was three of them, right? It was two brothers, and then somebody else. So who was also real close to them. Well, they were all at this gala, and on this particular day, I was like, hey guys, I want to talk to y'all real quick. And I sat down with them. It was after the gala, but still in the gala.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, hey man, I want to do I want to be a public speaker, whoop, 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 and I appreciate if you guys could kind of help me out. So
You're
then
putting yourself out there, right?
yeah, so I spoke
Mm-hmm.
with them and I was like, if you guys if they could kind of help me um create some type of plan or strategy to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
that, right? In a way where I could be getting paid and generate some
Yeah.
type of income through speaking. They were like, all right, cool, cool, cool. So then I started talking to different, I started talking to them and they helped me out with different things. And well, we started going and it was that moment, that conversation that
Mm.
really then propelled me to kind of start moving in that direction. And the very first thing that we kind of came up with was something called JC Ventures,
Okay.
right? And JC Ventures eventually gave way to CordonConcepts,
Mm.
right? Literally it was what followed right after because I was gonna put myself as what I was doing as JC Ventures. But then after speaking with another boy of mine, he was like, "Nah, man, that sounds a bit
Like
JC
an
Venture doesn't sound like."
investment, like firm.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily sound like creative, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So then I was like, all right. So, anyways, they come up with CordonConcepts. It's kind of two
Mm-hmm.
different things. Because CordonConcepts is more of a stage name,
Oh,
and
okay.
AC Ventures was more of like a business name,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
you could say. But anyways, it was in that moment. Um, and I think that was when I was like 24, 23, or something like
Oh,
that.
wow. Okay.
Um, Yeah, somewhere around there. The moment I realized that I wanted to be a poet, identified as a poet, was years after that, a few years after that, when I kind of put myself in a difficult situation
Okay.
through different means, right? Through bad decision making,
Yeah. Life
through
just happened.
indulging in too much liquor, and through personal kind of temper issues and things of that sort, and
Okay.
put myself in a really bad situation. Well, in order to emerge out of that situation, took a lot of soul searching. And one of the things that I
Mm.
discovered during that period was that I wanted to be a poet. Not only that I want to be a poet, but I was a poet, right? And that was one of the very few identities that nobody could take away from me, right? And so those are two different moments. Thank you, brother. That happened apart from each other, but were connected, right? And ever since that time, since that very first conversation at that table, I've been thinking and I've been planning as a speaker, right?
Mm.
And I still maintain that, but now I call myself a poet. Um, so yeah,
Wow, man. That's I mean, it's crazy that like one conversation, right? All it took was one conversation for you to put yourself out there, speak with your chest and have confidence that your work that's who you are, and then like help, like not being scared to ask for other people's help as well. um I think is so big in just the creative scene. I feel like a lot of people will try to do it by themselves, and it's always tough to do things by yourself. I think
yeah,
it's
yeah,
always
yeah.
networking is huge. But I wanted to pick one piece there that you said that was very important, that you're talking about you were going through, there's a period in your life when you were going through like a tough time. You're saying you were indulging in liquor, made some bad decisions, which brings me to my next question, actually, which is do you see poetry as a form of healing and resistance, or even both, right? How has poetry, um, helped you overcome those type of things?
Yeah, that's great questions, man. So I say that, and I may need to take more time with my answers,
Yeah, of course, whatever time you need.
offline with myself to kind of really
Mm,
um, get to the core of it. But at the moment,
yeah.
what I want to say is that I think poetry is more resistance than healing.
Mm,
Um, I think poetry, at least for let me speak personally, is more resistance than healing. I think that what poetry allows myself to do, and perhaps others, is to acknowledge um, potential pain, to acknowledge potential issues, to acknowledge potential aspirations, to acknowledge potential ironies,
yeah.
dilemmas, things of that sort, and then create and then become or create a path to either resist those or to embrace those, whether it's desires, ambitions, aspirations, or whether it's issues, problems, pain, hurt. um I think it allows you to see them clearly and then to try to pick your way at it,
Mm,
or to try to create barriers or to create a system to get over things. But I think the actual healing is done outside of poetry.
oh, okay.
I think it's done outside of poetry with regular life, right?
Right.
With regular conversations, with regular situations.
Mm-hmm.
I think what poetry is a lens through which to be able to clearly see those things, um, and a way to, if there is some pain, if there is some uh, anger, if there is some hurt, it's a way to be able to capture those feelings, and control them
Mm,
without them capturing you and controlling you. in other words, it allows you to find the silver lining in the negative situations. It allows you to turn a negative into a positive. However, once that poetry has been created,
Mm-hmm.
once those words have been put to the page, it can be the case that you no longer think of it. It
Yeah.
can be the case that maybe you had a heartbreak or you had a death in the family or something, and you wrote a poem,
Mm-hmm.
and that was everything. They got it out. But
Yep.
more often than not, those feelings that were captured so eloquently in a poem will still remain with the person.
Right.
You know, so I think it's more resistance and
Mm.
healing. Um, but again, I may have to take some time to think about it more.
Yeah, no, I love that answer. I definitely got like a new perspective. Um, I was very curious on how you would answer that. A lot of podcasts send like questions over to their to the people they interview beforehand. I don't like to do that because you get the realist answers when you're in the moment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was mad real. So no, I love that. Um, the other thing I wanted to ask you as well was, speaking of the power that words have, right? Specifically language, right? Because you in a lot of your poetry you blend Spanish and English.
Mm.
Um, so to you, like, how important is language in preserving like identity and culture, like through poetry?
Another great question, brother. So, not just in poetry, but language in and of itself, I think
Mm,
is vital to maintaining identity. Um, you know, language is really language can metaphorically be your land even after you've lost it.
wow.
Meaning, you can be at a piece of you could have been at a particular place for many generations, and it could be the case that you lose that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you become displaced, and over time, you slowly start to lose certain aspects of what that life was like. But language allows that to survive, right?
It's like
It's
a
like
link.
yeah, it's a link to that homeland, right? And once you have lost, for example, a small example, maybe not the best, but somebody say from El Salvador, like my mom, right, or Guatemala, like my father, right? Over there, the predominantly speak Spanish, although there's a lot of indigenous languages that are spoken as
Yeah,
well,
so
right?
many.
Well, my parents speak Spanish, right? Coming here to the US, you experience a lot of folks that speak English.
Hmm.
But when they hear that Spanish, at least in those early days, right, it was that small sense of security, even though you are in this excuse me, even though you are in this foreign land,
Yeah.
you still have that language that makes you feel like there's that link. So I would say it's fundamental to preserving identity. Once you lose your language, it is I think the culture can quickly follow.
Hmm.
Right? You don't need land to maintain a culture, right? But the reason why language is so fundamental to culture, as is land, but you could still maintain your culture even without that land. You could just move somewhere else and adjust. Now,
Yep.
language expresses ideas.
Hmm.
And while even myself, as I speak to you now, don't fully comprehend this, I know it's true. And that is that language is structured differently depending on the language.
Hmm.
Right? So there's things you can say in Spanish that do not make sense in English,
Yeah.
right? Or vice versa,
Yeah.
right? There's certain words that just do not exist in other languages.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's literally possible to say something in one language and not be able to replicate that what is being said in it. All you could do is translate it to the best of your ability, but without having an understanding of that language, it is hard to fully grasp that idea, right?
Yeah. Like sana sana colita de rana.
Yeah, in a way, right? In a way that's culture, right?
Yeah.
That's culture that in English doesn't carry that weight. For example, like échale ganas, ponte las pilas.
Yeah.
These things don't carry that weight. Um, but also there's actual words that don't exist. So for example, we might say, look at that tree. But other languages, the way that they're structured, might just say, look at tree. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
simply because of the way that the words are put together because of the nature of the language. And so for those reasons, language is fundamental. What what poetry allows you to do is to maintain some of the more important words of your culture potentially,
Yeah, I
right?
love that. I love that.
Where now I have no idea if that's true. I'm just talking right now, right?
No, no,
But
I
but but,
agreed
but
though.
it that's what poetry may potentially be doing. It might be collecting the more important words of a society or a culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
For example, you might find a lot of love, the word love or the word hate in in poetry, but you might
Mm.
not find a word like Riz, which I hear is like this new word, right? You might
Yeah,
not hear
yeah.
that as often. Maybe as time moves on and Riz becomes a bigger part of the vernacular. Um, but until then, you're gonna hear a lot more love and hate because it's a stronger part of the culture. Those words carry more
Yeah.
weight. Um, so yeah, man, I would say it's fundamental, absolutely necessary to maintaining identity. And without it, I think an identity could quickly shift, become completely different,
Mm-hmm.
unravel, and I think culture can quickly disappear, when language is no longer preserved.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I feel like nothing like a lot of you do a lot of like I said, a lot of work with where you're raising awareness and issues and you mix in like that culture and English and Spanish into your work. Um and one of the most, recent, well, I guess you did it a while ago, but still relevant. That came up even more reposted by like Brown Issues was the immigrant home video and poem, and I really like that one, and definitely think also because of what you mixed into it. You a lot of things that we relate to, things that we have to do growing up, like reading documents and then translating words that we don't even know, right? And then you go into Spanish and say, I was raised con pan dulce, cafecito, pupusas, arroz con frijolitos, ay que rico. That right, just that sentence, it's English, it's Spanish, and culture. Like that's why I just think that the work that you do is so amazing, and like it's so relatable, and so many people will just relate to it. But tell us a little bit about that specific poem and how it
Yeah,
came about in your process.
yeah, man. So I'm very proud of that poem. Now, the original video, the one that originally went viral,
Mm.
um, was not what we expected to happen by any
Oh,
means of
okay.
the imagination, right? So, um, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the poem itself
Yeah.
too. But at that time, I had a bunch of poems done, and my cousin and I, Landex, shout out Free Best Record and DOD, we were just riding around the bay, right? And in this particular day, we were riding around Oakland,
Okay.
and We were just shooting, we were just filming. And then we came across this mural, we hopped out real quick and then filmed it right there in Oakland. And
Wow.
well, we it wasn't the best quality video, by far, but it especially wasn't. The visual quality was pretty decent actually,
Mm-hmm.
but the audio was far from, because there was a lot of muffling and there was a lot of just in different pieces of the audio, but then it blew up, right? In big part because Brown Issues did pick it up, and a lot of folks connected to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it usually performs quite well whenever it is posted up. And I think the reason for this, because like you said, a lot of people relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that that poem was born was because it was around, I wrote that poem around 2020, 2019, around that time, I think.
Okay.
And as you know, during that time, there's a lot of political movement. There was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things that were going on, from coronavirus to the stuff with George Floyd,
Yep.
and all these things. But um, in addition to that, there was also stuff happening with everybody, but to the brown community as well. And in 2020 in particular, I remember um, during the month of June, there was three young men that were killed by the police, right? Andres
Mm-hmm.
Guardado,
Mm-hmm.
Eric Salgado, I think his name was, and Sean Monterosa. They were all killed within a span of 1 month, within even like 3 weeks of each other or something like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't see a response, and I think a lot of people felt this way. And now it's changed, because those families, especially the Sean Monterosa, especially the Monterosa sisters, Sean Monterosa's
Yeah.
sisters, um, have really taken the fight up for themselves, and have really been putting in a lot of legwork and countless hours and time, blood,
Mm-hmm.
sweat, and tears into making sure that his name is not forgotten and
Okay.
that he gets justice. But it's because that they were the rallying wasn't there as much, where in other cases you would see, even without somebody organizing in particular for a particular person, you would see a wide response
Yeah.
of folks saying, justice, justice, even if
Yep.
nobody, even if no one person was actually organizing something
Mm-hmm.
for it. Like for example with Shama Torosa, where really it took the sisters organizing to really make movement there, right? Um, and then there was two other young men that were good. I didn't see that response, and so that was one thing that was really in my head. And what it led me to start thinking was kind of going back to storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that, feeling that I did not see my story out there.
Mm-hmm.
Even within other Latino creatives, I didn't see it out there. Meaning, I'll give you an example. Meaning, like let's look at like Selena, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or a or some of the telenovelas that you there was one I used to watch called um what the Frijolito was one, and
Yeah.
uh some other ones, man. But
Yeah.
you grew up watching telenovelas,
Yeah. Of course. Yep.
um, or on different shows, Gorda La Flaca, all these different
Yep.
things. Even within those, I didn't see somebody speaking about the experience of what it was like to be raised in an immigrant home, or through
Mm-hmm.
that context, and in particular through a Latino immigrant experience, or brown immigrant experience, however you want to
Mm-hmm.
term. Um, but that was the lens through which I was looking at things, and I thought I want to get I want to get that story. I want to get my experience, what I have experienced. I want to get that out there, right?
Yeah.
That's all I was trying to do, was trying to get my experience and say, like, this is, I want to represent what I've experienced. I want to represent my story. I want it to be out there.
Yep.
That's all that happened there because I didn't see it. Not just with the police thing, but about brown stories not being told enough,
Mm-hmm.
about brown experiences, even when something as tragic as what happened with Shawn Monterosa happens and these other young men, but also within brown storytelling, I didn't see my experience,
Yep.
right? So then I decided to put my story out there, and it turned out that a lot of people felt the same way.
Yep.
A lot, and now I think you see it more now. Um, I think you see stories of, and maybe I see it more because I'm more connected to people now, but I also think in general we see it more now too,
No,
even
I think we see it more
in
now as well. Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
so that was the story behind that poem, man. Was I didn't see our stories being represented, or embraced by the larger community, and I also didn't see my personal experience
Yeah.
being represented even within brown storytelling.
Yep. No, yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And often is it's a like a need that helps us give that fire that we need to our work, right? It's a
Yeah.
necessity. It's and especially here in in the US, it's us like going to see a movie and being like, hey, wait a minute, like I don't see any brown folks in that movie. Like I can't see myself being like that superhero or something like that, right? Because it's not my color, like, and it's representation that matters for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely see it more now than when you created that video originally, for sure. And that's probably why also it's gone even more viral because I thought, yeah, because I definitely seen it before, and then it got reposted, and it just blew up, and I'm glad it did because so many people relate to it. And I think some of your other work has also gone viral and some videos, but how has that like level of visibility changed your opportunities or like the way that you now approach your craft?
Great question, man. It's definitely allowed for much more opportunities. More people can see the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And connect with it. So it's provided a lot of opportunities. For example, with the gentleman junior I was telling you
Yeah.
about with the story, it's called These Days.
Mm.
And let me go back to the thing about the brown stories
Yeah.
too. Even within the Latino spaces, within that small landmass called Central America,
Mm-hmm.
those stories are very underrepresented, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador, right? In those other countries, um, are very underrepresented. And which is why that representation is so important, which is what that gentleman junior was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that without the poem like Immigrant Home and it doing as well as it did, perhaps Junior and I wouldn't have connected,
Mm.
right? Because it does go a long way, right?
Yeah.
I
Yep.
could only meet so many people in a day,
Right.
right? And allowing the work to sit online for folks to discover it, and hopefully that they feel comfortable reaching out or doing whatever they got to do to get in contact. It's opened a lot of doors.
Yeah.
Um, the way that it kind of changed what I've done,
Mm.
it hasn't necessarily changed too much. However, I am more aware of how important those opportunities are, um, and how important it is to be in a position to capitalize on them. Meaning, those moments of high visibility are great, but there are moments, right? There
Right.
are moments, and without a strategy or without some type of plan in place,
Yeah.
um, whether it's already set, whether it's already created, or whether you respond to the moment very quickly, without those, that moment will disappear, right? And while you will get some benefit off of it, you will lose opportunities if you aren't fully prepared.
Right. Yeah. Seizing the moment,
Yeah.
capitalizing on those opportunities to make sure that you definitely make the best of it. So
Mhm.
that's some great advice right there. Now, before we end here, we got some a few more questions, but I wanted to
Of
ask,
course, man.
'cause it's getting to closer to the time to an hour here, and then
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're a busy guy, so I don't want to keep you too long, but
Thank you, man.
you know, if you could sit down with your younger self, maybe when you were first like discovering poetry, activism, or just when you were going through like a tough time, what's like one piece of advice that you'd give him, like your younger self?
Probably just stick to it. I'm not sure this is much more. Now there are a lot of um situations that I wish I wouldn't have put myself in.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure any single conversation would have made a big difference. You know, so probably just kind of what we started off saying at the beginning of this, just stick to it, and when you fall off, get back to it.
Mm.
Right? Because I have trusted my dreams, I guess you could say, for lack of better words, for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I've wanted to live a life as a creative, originally as a rapper, right? But as a poet now, and I am doing that,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and so whatever that youngster did, he did something right,
Damn
So
right. Damn right.
I would tell him to stick to it, and when he falls off, when it gets off course, get back to it.
Mm. Yeah, for sure, man. I love that. And before we wrap up here, I want to highlight your work as
Thank
much as
you.
I can, put it out there. Tell us, do you have any like upcoming shows, any projects that you're working on that you'd like to share with the audience, and like where people can follow your work or connect with you?
Yeah, of course, man. Thank you so much for the opportunity, man. It's been a pleasure to spend this time with you.
Yeah,
Um,
likewise.
yeah, man, they can find me under Cordon Concepts,
Hmm.
on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all streaming platforms. And they'll find spoken word poetry there, as well as some hybrid stuff in there. Meaning like there'll be some poetry with music. In terms of upcoming shows, yeah, man. Well, we have our open mic the last Friday of every month, here in the city of Antioch. This weekend on Saturday, I'll be at two rallies, pro-immigration rallies, one in Richmond, California, the other one in Concord, California. Um, I'll be over at an event called Rock the School Bells at a at a junior college here in the Bay Area, next month, where I'll be teaching a workshop, a grassroots poetry workshop.
Hmm.
And then in terms of other performances, I can't think of anyone. I have to go look into my calendar, but I know for a fact the two this weekend on Saturday. And we also were creating a new play. For the
Ooh.
past 3 years, I've been leading a program that I was able to create and launch through an organization called Monument Impact, and we've created original plays. This will be our fourth year, so we're getting ready to create our fourth
Wow.
original play. But we have no time just yet. I just know it'll be, I believe, in October, November, somewhere
Okay.
around there when we'll bring it out to folks.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure I'm missing quite a bit, but I
No,
think that's
yeah. I mean, look,
the
you got a
moment.
lot going on, so. And then with your grassroots poetry, do
Yeah.
you do like poets, do they sign up for like if when you do events, like just do like do they hit you up, or how does
Yeah,
that?
so grassroots poetry is really a collective of poets.
Hmm.
It's when we have the open mics, poets just come through,
Oh, okay,
right?
okay, that's
But we have different things for example, we also have our hikes where we're about to start our gardening.
yeah, I
Um,
love that. What?
yeah,
That's cool.
well, we got it. We're just working on getting an MOU now, um, which is a memorandum of understanding. Um, so we have these different opportunities, and what grassroots poetry really is a collective of poets who are organizing to build community through poetry, from relationships to real estate, meaning that we're working to create bonds and relationships through our work as poets when we go out and connect.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also trying to build a community legitly where it's, if you have a need, if you have a requirement, as a human, as a human being, as a person,
Yeah.
you have folks around you that can meet that need,
Ooh.
that can meet that requirement. Um, but also we're working actively to acquire pieces of land and property. For example,
Yeah.
when we're about to do that garden, to the MOU would be for us to essentially have, written stewardship of that land, and
Oh.
us to be able to cultivate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't own the land, it would be owned by somebody else, but
It'd be like the rights for
we
it.
would have the rights to
Mm-hmm.
utilize the land, right? For
Mm-hmm.
how we seem fit for the community garden. But we're also in community, in talks with the city to get a lease for this building in downtown.
Wow.
And while neither of those are ownership, it is our first steps
Yep.
into management and into getting into that field of work. And that is really what we are. And so the way that poets will get involved is, one, by showing up to the open mics,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or to the hikes or to the garden, and then being consistent. When we have events, like when I get asked to bring poets, um, or when I have events, I do that through a separate kind of organizing structure for the most part, right? Because we're working on developing programs within grassroots that poets could work through.
Mm.
And develop some type of income through, but those are still in the process. Um, the way to get involved with grassroots is really to show up,
Yep.
um, and understand that it for us it starts with poetry, um, but it does not end there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it does not end there.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful way to end it too, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being on here, making the time. You definitely got a lot going on. So,
Thank you,
so many awesome projects that you got upcoming and everything. So, no, I definitely thank you for just making the time to be here and then share what you're doing with us and your art and with the community. So, thank you for that.